What does a hardened, chain-smoking newspaper editor have in common with uh, the person protecting children at your local school?
Right, it sounds like the setup to a really bad joke.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it turns out they both lie awake at night agonizing over the exact same question. Like, just because a story is absolutely true, does that mean anyone else actually has the right to know it?
And that question cuts right to the core of how we handle information. I mean, an experienced editor understands this very uncomfortable truth about human nature. There is this massive, often really dangerous gap between public curiosity and actual public interest.
Yeah, we totally confuse the two all the time.
We do. Just because a piece of information exists and just because people are practically, foaming at the mouth to know about it does not automatically mean that sharing it serves any ethical purpose whatsoever.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring the profound difference between simply gathering sensitive information and ethically stewarding it.
Yeah.
We're looking at what a designated safeguarding leader, the DSL, the person responsible for handling child protection in a school, what they can learn from the ethical code of a veteran journalist.
And this applies to you, the listener, right? Whether you manage a team, run a clinic, or just navigate everyday office politics.
Oh, for sure. Think about that burning urge you get when you hear a juicy piece of gossip at work. Your brain just lights up.
Oh, yeah, you can't help it.
Someone says, did you hear why Dave was crying in the break room? And suddenly you need to know everything.
Every single detail.
Right. Now, take that instinct and multiply the stakes by 1,000. Because in a safeguarding context, you aren't dealing with boardroom drama. A child's physical safety, their mental health, and, their fundamental dignity are on the line.
And if you look at the evolutionary psychology of that urge you just mentioned, we are literally wired to gather information about our tribe.
To stay safe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Knowing who is doing what, who is in trouble, who's allied with who, that kept our ancestors alive. So when a teacher sees a student acting out, their brain just demands the backstory to resolve the anomaly.
They just have to know why.
Yeah. But the foundational principle for an editor, which translates perfectly here, is drawing a brutal line between a necessary disclosure and an unnecessary exposure.
Okay, break that down for me a bit.
Sure. So a necessary disclosure serves a vital function, like alerting the public to a corrupt politician, or, in our case, telling a teacher a specific trigger to avoid for a student.
Right.
But an unnecessary exposure. That might spark a lot of intense discussion and satisfy that primal itch for tribal knowledge, but ultimately it just violates the dignity of the person at the center of the story.
That distinction introduces a huge trap, though. Because, we rarely admit we are just being nosy.
No.
We totally mask our curiosity. One of the most insidious things we do in these environments is what you could call gossip disguised as concern.
Yes, that happens all the time.
Right. I can picture this so clearly. A well-meaning teacher comes up to the safeguarding lead, lowers their voice, and asks for the traumatic details of a kid's home life. And they frame it as, I just really want to know how to support them better in my math class.
And it sounds so pure.
It sounds incredibly pure.
It does. And, the intention often genuinely is pure, but handing over sensitive, traumatic details to someone who doesn't strictly need them to perform their protective duties, that's a massive breach of ethics.
Even if they mean well.
Even then. The DSL has to absorb the frustration of that teacher. They have to act as the editor and say, no, you don't need the backstory to do your job.
Well, let me push back on this a little bit, because if I'm that teacher on the front lines dealing with a kid who is throwing chairs or completely shutting down every single day, this whole need to know concept feels incredibly bureaucratic.
We get that. It feels cold.
It does. It feels like an administrative wall put up by management, and just to keep people in the dark, maybe to avoid liability. How on earth can I help a kid if I don't know the whole picture of what's going on?
The frustration is completely valid, but the premise is flawed. Need to know is fundamentally a safeguarding principle. It's not some human resources hurdle.
Okay, how so?
Well, here is the mechanism of why oversharing is so destructive. It creates actual, measurable, secondary harm. Let's say a student has suffered a horrific form of abuse.
Right.
If the safeguarding lead tells the math teacher the graphic details of that abuse just to satisfy their concern, what happens next? The teacher looks at that student differently.
Oh, they get the pity stare.
Exactly. They get the pity stare. The teacher might lower their academic expectations. They might unconsciously treat them like a fragile victim instead of just a normal kid.
So the student essentially loses the one normal environment they had left.
Precisely. They lose their agency and their privacy. The classroom was their safe, predictable space, and now it's polluted by their trauma because
Yeah.
the teacher just can't unknow those details.
Right, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
You really can't. If a teacher needs to know that a child requires a quiet space, or that loud noises trigger a trauma response, the safeguarding lead shares that actionable guidance.
Just the guidance, not the story.
Right. They give the staff member the exact tools to protect the child without providing the entertainment of the child's tragedy. Sharing the trauma itself, when it's irrelevant to the protective action, is actively stripping that child of their dignity.
Wow. That mechanism completely flips the script. You weren't withholding information to be difficult. You were withholding it to keep the child's environment uncontaminated,
Exactly.
which logically forces us to ask a much deeper question. If the surrounding community, even the most well-meaning, deeply invested teachers, don't automatically have a right to this information, who actually owns the story?
Well, the best editors in the world don't sit around asking who benefits from us printing this.
Right.
They ask who owns this narrative. And in a safeguarding context, the information fundamentally belongs to the student's lived experience. It belongs to their dignity.
I think of it like the difference between being an owner and being a custodian.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, imagine someone hands you a wildly expensive, incredibly fragile Fabergé egg that belongs to their family. You don't own it.
You're just holding it.
Right. And because you don't own it, you cannot take it home, put it on your mantelpiece, and show it off at dinner parties
Yeah.
to make yourself look like an interesting person who has access to rare things.
Right. It's not yours to show off.
Your only ethical mandate is to keep it locked in a padded box for the person it actually belongs to.
That's a perfect analogy. And institutions struggle with this custodian concept constantly. Large organizations, whether it's schools, hospitals, corporations, they have this terrible gravitational pull toward reducing a breathing, vulnerable human being into a case file.
Oh, absolutely. A folder on a desk.
Yeah. And once a student's trauma becomes a case, it suddenly mutates into a narrative for institutional handling. The school starts managing its own anxiety.
They start managing the PR.
Exactly. The PR of the situation, the paperwork, the potential liability, rather than the reality of the child.
Well, because it is so much easier to manage paperwork than it is to sit with human pain.
Yeah,
If I turn you into a file, I don't have to look you in the eye.
that's spot on. And that requires a massive leadership shift to correct. The student's humanity has to remain heavier than the institutional narrative.
Yeah.
A safeguarding file sitting on a desk is basically a sterile representation of someone's absolute worst day or their ongoing nightmare. The custodian must never lose sight of the fact that they do not own the nightmare. They are merely holding it.
Okay, so you're fiercely guarding this Fabergé egg.
Yeah.
But inevitably, there are times when the custodian realizes they absolutely must share something.
Right. You can't keep everything locked away forever.
Exactly. Maybe the risk is too high or a specific intervention is needed. But how that information is shared is where things get incredibly messy.
Very messy.
Because sharing a handful of naked facts without the proper context can actually do as much damage as a straight-up lie.
Any good editor knows that facts without context distort reality. Partial truths mislead the public. If you publish a provocative headline with only half the story, the audience will instinctively fill in the blanks with their own worst anxieties.
Yeah, and their own assumptions.
Oh.
Let's talk about the absolute most chaotic environment for this in the modern world, which is the unregulated parent WhatsApp group.
Oh boy. Yes.
We all know these chats. They are essentially a rogue newspaper operating without an editor, fueled entirely by panic and caffeine.
That is the perfect description.
How does this mechanism actually work when raw facts hit a group chat like that?
Well, think about the timeline of a rumor in one of those groups. A parent is dropping off their kid and they see a police car parked outside the school. That is a raw, accurate fact. Police are at the school, they take a photo, and they post it to the group of 200 parents.
Because they saw it.
Right. They have the procedural permission of their own eyes. They saw it. It's true, so they share it. But because there is no editor, there is zero context.
And nature abhors a vacuum. So the parents immediately start guessing.
Panic ensues instantly. Within 10 minutes, a routine wellness check for a specific student has mutated into rumors of a weapon on campus or an assault.
Oh, wow.
Assumptions just run wild. Stigma attaches to entirely innocent students who just happen to be absent that day. Public sharing without context humiliates, stigmatizes, and re-traumatizes people.
Because no one paused to ask why they were sharing it.
Exactly. The parent who posted it didn't ask the ethical question, should I? What is the emotional and psychological consequence of blasting raw data out to an anxious crowd?
Which puts the safeguarding lead in an impossible position, because now they have hundreds of angry parents demanding the truth to calm their own anxiety.
And the lead has to just stand there and take the hit.
Yeah, they have to refuse to confirm or deny the rumor, which of course makes them look like they are hiding something sinister.
This is a crucial professional truth that gets deeply misunderstood. Confidentiality is not secrecy. It is protection.
Say that again, because that's huge.
Confidentiality is not secrecy. It is protection. When a safeguarding professional refuses to validate a rumor for a mob of demanding parents, they are actively putting a shield in front of a vulnerable child.
Even if the parents are furious.
Yes, the parents will be angry. The school might even take a temporary reputational hit for being, quote-unquote, untransparent.
Right.
But information sharing without nuance destroys trust with the victim. True ethical safeguarding requires an immense amount of restraint. It requires the professional to absorb the discomfort of the crowd's anger so the child doesn't have to absorb their judgment.
Okay, hold on. I'm seeing a massive, terrifying loophole in this whole quiet custodian idea.
Okay, what is it?
We've just built a fortress around this concept of restraint. Keep the air limb locked up, be the shield, absorb the anger. But if the absolute golden rule is protect the story and stay quiet, aren't we accidentally creating the perfect environment for abusers to thrive?
Yes.
I mean, doesn't absolute secrecy create a totally different kind of danger? We've all seen the documentaries about massive institutional cover-ups where everyone stayed quiet to protect privacy and the abuse just kept happening.
You've just hit the exact point where the newspaper analogy shatters, and it's vital we look at it. Silence can be profoundly, systemically harmful.
Right. Avoidance enables abuse.
Completely. If an institution becomes so obsessed with confidentiality that they never share risk information with the proper authorities or other agencies, that silence stops protecting the child and starts protecting the abuser.
It protects the harmful system itself.
Exactly.
So the journalism framework actually fails us here.
Completely fails. A newspaper editor operates within public communication ethics. Their ultimate goal is exposure. They want the audience to read the story to root out corruption.
Yeah.
But a safeguarding lead operates within child-centered welfare ethics. Their goal isn't exposure, it's intervention.
That's a huge difference.
It is. The editor wants millions to know the story. The safeguarding lead actively hopes nobody ever needs to know the story unless it is the specific person who can stop the harm.
That tightrope sounds exhausting. I mean, you can't overshare because that causes secondary harm, pollution of the child's environment, and violates their dignity.
Right.
But you can't lock it in a vault either because silence enables monsters. How do you actually walk that line without falling into either extreme?
It comes down to precision sharing. It is the careful balancing of confidentiality, transparency, and accountability. Ethical safeguarding isn't about hoarding information. If there is a risk, you must escalate those concerns. But you escalate them vertically to the people with the power to intervene: child protective services, medical professionals, specific trained leadership.
Not your buddy in the break room.
Exactly. You do not broadcast them horizontally to the staff room or the community.
So you are giving the exact right amount of information to the exact right person at the exact right time to achieve exactly one goal.
Stopping the harm.
Stopping the harm. Nothing more, nothing less.
And here is the uncomfortable reality for any institution. The priority must always center protection over institutional reputation.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
If a school or a company is keeping quiet because escalating a safeguarding issue might make them look bad in the press, they have failed entirely. They have stopped being a custodian of the child and started being a PR firm for themselves.
So bring this out of the abstract and directly into your world, the listener. Let's say you manage a team, or you sit on a board, or you just want to be a better steward of the sensitive human data you encounter in your life.
Yeah, how do you practically do this?
Right. How do you actually build an ethical information culture? Because you can't just send out an email that says, stop gossiping and be better custodians. People will just ignore it.
They absolutely will.
Yeah.
You build it by establishing foundational systems of safety that are modeled from the top down. You train your staff so that confidentiality is properly understood.
Not just as a wall.
Right, not as a bureaucratic weapon used by HR to shut down inconvenient conversations, but as an active daily shield to protect human dignity. You create pathways where people can escalate concerns safely.
Okay,
But most importantly, leaders have to ruthlessly police their own curiosity.
that's the hardest part.
It really is. When a leader models reflective, disciplined communication, when they actively shut down casual speculation in a meeting, it sets the tone that vulnerability is handled with reverence here.
So what does this all mean? It really boils down to one brutal, system-level question. Does your culture genuinely understand the difference between information needed for protection and information shared out of mere curiosity?
Exactly. If someone is sharing a detail, is it to stop a harm, or is it because they just feel entitled to know?
Yeah.
That is the mirror we all have to look into. When a story crosses your desk or pops up on your phone, you have to weigh the human cost of passing it on. Because ultimately, dignity matters every bit as much as accuracy.
Wow.
The truth of a fact does not grant you the moral authority to wield it carelessly.
Dignity matters as much as accuracy. It's not enough for the information to be verified. The way you handle it has to be humane.
Perfectly said.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to chew on today. We live in a digital ecosystem where instant sharing, over-explaining, and radical transparency are constantly celebrated as the ultimate virtues.
We really do.
We're culturally conditioned to believe that sharing everything is how we show authenticity and build connection. But what if, in the context of someone else's trauma, the exact opposite is true?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
What if holding back information, choosing to absorb the heavy, uncomfortable burden of knowing something terrible, and actively choosing to carry it quietly so someone else doesn't have to? What if that is actually the highest form of care we can offer another human being?
It completely redefines what it means to be a protector. True care often looks like standing as a quiet, invisible barrier between a vulnerable person and an endlessly curious world.
So the next time you find yourself holding a piece of sensitive information, an exclusive scoop about someone else's life, put yourself back in that chain-smoking newspaper editor's chair.
Right.
You know the story is true. You have all the receipts. But you have the power to decide who is actually protected by sharing this and whose story is it really.